The security camera timestamp reads 2:47 a.m. The house is dark, silent, empty. Then you hear it. A key turning in the lock. Footsteps. Whispered voices. A woman's voice, my mother's voice, echoing through the empty hallway. Once everything is here, she won't fight it. You know how she is. She'll just accept it. Another voice, my brother's voice. Are you sure about this, Mom? Trust me, David. By the time Sarah gets back from Singapore, it'll be too late to change anything. The camera captures shadows moving through my living room. A tape measure. Boxes stacked against the wall. Furniture being arranged. This wasn't a visit. This was an invasion. While I was 7,000 miles away on a business trip, my mother unlocked my front door, walked inside my home, and began executing a plan to move my 32-year-old brother into my house without asking, without permission, without a single conversation. She thought I wouldn't fight back. She thought I'd stay silent like I always had. She was wrong. What happened next shattered my family forever. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This isn't just a story about family betrayal. It's about the invisible chains that bind us to people who've learned that our love means we'll accept anything. It's about the moment you realize that the person who gave you life has been taking pieces of it back, year after year, sacrifice after sacrifice. And it's about what happens when you finally say no. But to understand how we got here, to understand why a mother would do this to her own daughter, we need to go back. Back to a childhood where love was conditional, where attention was currency, and where I learned very early that my role in this family was to be strong so that my brother could be weak. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 41 years old. I grew up in a middle-class suburb outside of Cleveland, Ohio, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. My father, Robert, worked in manufacturing management. My mother, Patricia, was a homemaker who poured all of her energy into our family. My brother David is 3 years younger than me. On paper, we were the American dream. But inside that house, there was an unspoken rule that shaped everything. David needed protecting, and I needed to be the one who never needed anything. I don't remember exactly when it started. Maybe it was always there. David was a colicky baby, a difficult toddler, a struggling student. He needed extra help with homework, extra patience with social situations, extra money for the things he wanted. And I learned to be the opposite. I became the child who didn't ask for things, who solved her own problems, who made good grades without drama. My parents praised me for my independence. Sarah's so easy, my mother would tell relatives. She just handles everything on her own. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I realize it was permission to ignore me. When I was 12 and David was 9, he stole $80 from my bedroom drawer, money I'd saved from babysitting. I knew it was him. I found the empty envelope under his bed. When I told my parents, my mother sat me down and explained that David was going through something and that I needed to be understanding. The money was never returned. I was told to let it go because family was more important than money. I learned the lesson she was really teaching. David's needs mattered more than my boundaries. In high school, I worked part-time jobs and paid for my own car insurance, my own clothes, my own senior trip. David got everything handed to him, and when he wrecked his car twice in 1 year, my parents paid for the repairs without question. When I asked if they could help me with college application fees, my mother said, "You're so responsible, Sarah. You'll figure it out." I did figure it out. I got scholarships, worked through college, graduated with minimal debt. David dropped out after 1 semester and moved back home. He was 20 years old. If you're watching this and recognizing these patterns in your own family, drop a comment below. You're not alone, and your story matters. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real stories about family dynamics and setting boundaries. The years that followed established a pattern that would define our family for the next 2 decades. David couldn't keep a job. He moved from retail to food service to warehouse work, never lasting more than 6 months anywhere. There was always a reason. The manager didn't like him. The schedule was impossible. His coworkers were toxic. My parents accepted every excuse and continued to support him financially. Meanwhile, I built a career in medical device sales. I moved to Portland, Oregon, bought my own condo at 28, sold it at 35, and bought a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I was proud of what I'd built. Every square foot represented a choice I'd made, a risk I'd taken, a goal I'd achieved. My house was my sanctuary. My mother visited, once when I first moved in. She walked through the rooms with a strange expression, something between pride and resentment. "This is a lot of house for just one person," she said. "It must be nice not to have anyone depending on you." The comment stung, but I brushed it off. That was just how she talked. It wasn't until much later that I understood what she really meant. I had resources, and in her mind, that meant I had an obligation to share them. David, meanwhile, was 32 years old and still living with our parents in Ohio. He'd never lived independently. He'd never paid rent. He'd had a series of short-term girlfriends who inevitably left when they realized he had no ambition and no plans to change. His current girlfriend, Melissa, had been around for about 6 months. From what my mother told me on our weekly phone calls, Melissa was really good for David and helping him get his life together. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my brother might finally grow up. Then I got the business trip assignment that changed everything. In early September, my company sent me to Singapore for a 2-week conference and client meetings. It was a huge opportunity, one I'd been working toward for years. I was excited, nervous, and completely focused on preparing. A week before I left, my mother called. "Honey, I was thinking," she said in that casual tone that always preceded a request. "Since you'll be gone for 2 weeks, maybe I should have a spare key to your house. Just in case something happens. A pipe bursts, or a package needs to be picked up, or—" "Mom, I have a neighbor who checks on things," I interrupted. "And the house is pretty secure." "I don't think, Sarah." Her voice shifted, taking on that edge of hurt disappointment she'd perfected over the years. "I'm your mother. Don't you trust me with a key to your own house?" I felt the familiar guilt wash over me. I was being unreasonable. She was offering to help. Why was I making this difficult? Share this video with someone who needs to hear the story. Drop a like if you're still watching, and tell us in the comments, have you ever felt pressured to give someone access to your space? We're building a community here, and your voice matters. "Okay," I said. "I'll mail you a spare key." "Why don't I just come pick it up this weekend?" she suggested. "We could have dinner. I haven't seen you in months." And that's how she got the key. We had dinner at my favorite Thai restaurant. She slipped the key into her purse with a smile. "Just for emergencies," she promised. "I won't even use it unless I absolutely have to." I flew to Singapore on September 15th. The first few days were intense, back-to-back meetings and presentations. I barely had time to check my personal phone. On day 4, my mother texted, "Stop by your house to water your plants. Everything looks good. Hope you're having a great trip." I stared at that text for a long moment. I didn't have plants that needed watering. I'd specifically avoided plants because I traveled for work. Why would she go to my house? I pushed down the uneasy feeling and replied, "Thanks, Mom. Didn't realize you were planning to check on things, but appreciate it." She responded immediately, "Of course, honey. That's what mothers do. Love you." Something felt off, but I was 8,000 miles away and exhausted. I told myself I was being paranoid. 2 days later, another text. "Stopped by again. Everything's still good. Such a beautiful house. So much space." Again, that strange phrasing. So much space. I called her that evening, despite the 14-hour time difference. "Mom, you don't need to keep checking the house. Seriously, everything's fine." I know, she said quickly. "I just like to make sure. You work so hard for this place. I want to protect it for you." "I appreciate that, but how Singapore? Tell me about the conference." She changed the subject smoothly, expertly. We talked for 20 minutes about work, about her garden, about nothing important. I hung up feeling like I'd been redirected but couldn't quite figure out how. That's when I did something I'd never done before. I logged into the security system I'd installed 3 months earlier. I'd gotten cameras and sensors after a break-in happened 2 streets over. Smart doorbell, motion-activated cameras in the living room and kitchen, sensors on all the doors. I'd barely looked at the app since installation. It was just supposed to be for peace of mind. I opened the app and scrolled back to the dates my mother mentioned visiting. September 19th, 2:30 p.m. The doorbell camera showed her arriving. She let herself in. So far, so normal. But then I watched the indoor camera footage. She wasn't watering plants. She was walking through the house slowly, deliberately, opening closets, checking rooms. She spent 15 minutes in my guest bedroom, measuring the walls with a tape measure she'd brought from her purse. Measuring my walls. If your gut is telling you something's wrong, it probably is. Hit that like button if you believe in trusting your instincts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of the story where everything comes crashing down. I sat in my hotel room in Singapore at 3 in the morning, watching my mother measure my guest bedroom, and felt something crack inside my chest. This wasn't concern. This wasn't a mother checking on her daughter's home. This was planning. But planning what? I scrolled to the September 21st footage. This time, my mother arrived at 11 a.m. She wasn't alone. David was with her. My brother, who lived in Ohio, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 weeks, was walking through my house in Portland, Oregon. They moved through the rooms together, my mother pointing, David nodding. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was clear. This was a tour. She was showing him around like a real estate agent. The guest bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. David opened my refrigerator. He stood in my living room with his hands on his hips, looking around like he was evaluating the space. They stayed for 40 minutes. When they left, my mother locked the door carefully behind them. I watched that footage 3 times, trying to make it mean something else, trying to find an innocent explanation. There wasn't one. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my hotel bed, 9,000 miles from home, and scrolled through every piece of footage from the past week. September 17th, my mother arriving alone, taking photos of each room with her phone. September 19th, the measuring tape incident. September 21st, the tour with David. September 23rd, my mother arriving with a woman I didn't recognize. Melissa, I assumed. David's girlfriend. The 3 of them walking through my house together. My mother gesturing animatedly, the girlfriend nodding and smiling. They stood in the guest bedroom for 10 minutes, the girlfriend taking photos. I wanted to call someone. I wanted to scream. But who would I call? My father? He'd spent 40 years deferring to my mother's judgment. Friends? What would I even say? I think my mother is planning something with my house, but I don't know what. It sounded paranoid. It sounded like I was overreacting. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to wait. I needed to see this through. I needed to catch them in the act, whatever the act was. Because if I confronted them now, they'd have an excuse ready. They'd gaslight me into believing I misunderstood. They'd make me feel crazy for being suspicious. So, I did something I'd never done before. I started setting a trap. Comment below what you think is about to happen next. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this story takes a turn you won't believe. The next morning, I texted my mother. Hey Mom, thanks so much for checking on the house. Makes me feel so much better knowing you're keeping an eye on things. Love you. She responded within minutes. Always happy to help, sweetheart. Enjoy the rest of your trip. I was giving her permission. I was making her feel safe. I was letting her think I had no idea what she was doing. Meanwhile, I was watching everything. September 24th. My mother arrived with David and Melissa at 1 p.m. This time, they brought boxes. Not moving boxes, but storage boxes, the kind you use for organizing. They carried them into the guest bedroom. I watched as they unpacked what looked like bedding, towels, and personal items. They were staging the room. They were setting up as if someone was going to live there. My brother was going to live there. In my house. Without asking me. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't just about visiting or staying temporarily. This was a plan to move David and his girlfriend into my home, to present it as a fait accompli when I returned. By the time Sarah gets back, it'll be too late to change anything. That's what my mother had said in that late-night footage, the clip I'd watched over and over. She knew I didn't like confrontation. She knew I avoided family conflict. She was banking on the fact that I'd be too shocked, too polite, too conditioned to keep the peace to actually kick them out once they were already settled in. The rage came in waves. Sitting in conference sessions, smiling at clients over dinner, presenting sales figures to executives, all while inside, I was screaming. How dare she? How dare he? My house. My sanctuary. The place I'd worked for, saved for, built for myself. And they were going to just take it, assuming I'd surrender, because that's what I'd always done. Surrender. Accommodate. Sacrifice. I changed my return flight. Instead of flying home on September 30th, I booked a flight for September 27th, arriving in Portland late at night. I didn't tell anyone. I watched the footage obsessively. September 25th, more boxes. Furniture being moved in from somewhere, a small dresser carried in by David and a man I didn't recognize. September 26th, the big one. At 3 p.m., my mother, David, Melissa, and the unknown man carried in a mattress. A full-size mattress, maneuvered carefully through my front door, down my hallway, into my guest bedroom. They were moving in. It was really happening. I watched my mother directing the placement, David adjusting the angle, Melissa standing back with her arms crossed, surveying the room like it was already hers. My mother's voice came through the camera audio clearly. See? I told you it would work. She's got all this space, and she's barely ever here anyway. You guys need this more than she needs an empty bedroom. Drop a like if you're feeling the rage right now. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends. And comment, tell us, have you ever had family take advantage of your success? Let's talk about it. I landed at Portland International Airport at 11:47 p.m. on September 27th. I took a cab home, telling the driver to park 2 houses down from mine. The house was dark. The street was quiet. I let myself in through the back door, the one without a camera, because it faced the fenced backyard. I stood in my kitchen in the dark, listening. Silence. I moved slowly through the house, my house, feeling like an intruder in my own space. Everything looked normal until I reached the guest bedroom. The door was closed. I opened it. The room had been transformed. The mattress was made up with sheets and a comforter I'd never seen before. The dresser stood against the wall, topped with men's cologne and a charging station. The closet door was open, revealing clothes on hangers, David's clothes. Shoes lined up neatly on the floor. On the nightstand, a framed photo of David and Melissa. They'd moved in. While I was in Singapore, working, my family had moved my unemployed brother and his girlfriend into my home without permission, without a conversation, without a shred of respect for my boundaries or my autonomy. I stood in that room for a long time, shaking with adrenaline and anger and something else, something that felt like grief. Because I knew what I was about to do would detonate my family. And I knew that no matter how justified I was, I would be cast as the villain. The selfish daughter who had so much and refused to share. The cold sister who turned her back on family in need. The ungrateful child who rejected her mother's help. I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room in the dark and planned. At 7 a.m., I texted my mother. Hey Mom, I'm coming home early. Wrap things up faster than expected. Landing tonight around 11 p.m. So excited to sleep in my own bed. I watched my phone. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Oh, wonderful honey. Safe travels. See you soon. 20 minutes later, my doorbell camera caught my mother arriving in a panic. She let herself in, practically running to the guest bedroom. I watched from my living room, 15 feet away behind a closed door, as she frantically stripped the bed, threw clothes into garbage bags, tried to dismantle the evidence. David arrived 30 minutes later. I could hear them through the door, urgent whispered arguing. I told you we had more time. She changed her flight. What was I supposed to do? We need to get everything out now. There's too much. We'll never make it. Then hide it. Put it in the garage, the basement, anywhere she won't look right away. I listened to my mother and brother conspire to hide the evidence of their invasion. I listened to them scramble and panic. And I waited. At 9:30 a.m., I heard the front door close. Silence. I waited 5 more minutes, then walked to the guest bedroom. They'd done their best. The mattress was gone. The dresser was gone. The photos, the clothes, most of the obvious signs removed. But they'd been sloppy in their panic. In the closet, pushed to the back, was a box of David's belongings. Under the bed, I found a phone charger. In the bathroom, Melissa's shampoo in the shower. They'd hidden the furniture in my garage, I discovered, covered with old blankets and tarps. If you've made it this far, you're part of this story now. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and comment below what would you do next? Would you confront them? Call the police? We want to hear from you. I documented everything. Photos of the hidden furniture, the leftover belongings, the blankets still warm from being slept under. I backed up all of the security footage to 3 separate locations. And then I called my mother. "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I'm actually home already. Got an earlier flight last night. Surprise." Silence on the other end then. Oh, that's wonderful, sweetie. How was your trip?" "Exhausting but good. Hey, can you come over this afternoon?"
I wanted to talk to you about something.
"Maybe around 2. I suppose I could. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just want to catch up. See you at 2. I hung up before she could ask more questions. Then I called a locksmith and scheduled them for 4 p.m. I called my father. "Dad, I need you to come to Portland today. This is important. I need you here by 2 p.m. "Sarah, what's going on? I can't just drop everything and, Dad." My voice was ice. "Either you get on a plane right now, or you'll hear about this from Mom's version. Your choice." He heard something in my tone he'd never heard before. "I'll be on the next flight." At 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. My mother stood on my porch with a casserole dish, her smile bright and brittle. "I thought I'd bring you some dinner since you just got home," she said. How thoughtful. I stepped aside to let her in. She moved through my house with the confidence of someone who'd been there many times recently. We sat in my living room. I let the silence stretch. "So," she said finally, "how was Singapore?" "Mom, where's David?" Her face did something complicated. "David? He's at home, I assume." "Why? Is he still living with you and Dad?" "Well, yes, but Sarah, why are you asking about your brother?" "Because," I said quietly, "I want to make sure I understand the situation before we have this conversation." Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Hit that notification bell. And drop a comment, are you Team Sarah or do you think she's overreacting? Let's discuss. My mother's face had gone pale, but she held her composure. "I don't know what you think is happening, but I know you've been coming into my house while I was in Singapore. Multiple times. I know you brought David here and Melissa. I know you measured my guest bedroom. I know you moved furniture in. A mattress, Mom. You moved a mattress into my house." She opened her mouth, closed it. Calculations happening behind her eyes. Should she deny? Admit? Justify? She chose justification. "Sarah, before you get upset, let me explain. David is in a really difficult situation right now. He and Melissa have been living in our basement, but it's not working. They need their own space. And you have this beautiful house with an extra bedroom that just sits empty, and you're gone for work half the time anyway, and I thought, you thought you'd move them in without asking me?" My voice was still calm, but something in it made her flinch. "I was going to talk to you about it," she said quickly. "But you're always so busy, and I knew you'd overthink it and make it complicated, and I just thought if I got them settled first, you'd see that it wasn't a big deal. You broke into my house. I have a key. You gave me a key. For emergencies. Not for moving my unemployed brother into my guest room without permission. Sarah, he's your brother. He's family. He needs help. And I'm what? An ATM? A free hotel. You're being selfish." The word hung in the air between us. Selfish. The accusation I'd been dodging my whole life. the weapon she'd wielded whenever I'd dared to put my own needs first. Share this with someone who's been called selfish for having boundaries. Hit like if you're feeling this. And subscribe, we're just getting to the most intense part. Let me tell you what's selfish, Mom, I said, my voice shaking now. Selfish is having a 32-year-old son who won't work, won't support himself, won't grow up, and instead of helping him become independent, you enable him. You make excuses for him. You bail him out again and again. And when he needs something you can't provide, you turn to me. You take from me. You've been taking from me my entire life. That's not fair. You stole from me to give to him. Over and over. When we were kids, you took my babysitting money and never made him pay it back. You paid for his car repairs with money that should have gone to my college fund. You praised me for being independent, which really meant you could ignore my needs because I didn't complain. You turned me into someone who never asks for anything, so David could be someone who never stops asking. Tears were running down her face now. I love both of my children equally. No, you don't. You love David more because he needs you more. And you resent me because I built a life you couldn't control. The doorbell rang. My father stood there, still in his airport clothes, face creased with worry and confusion. He looked at my mother crying on my couch, looked at me standing rigid with rage, and said, "What in God's name is happening?" I told him. Everything. The security footage, the furniture, the conspiracy to move David in without my knowledge. My mother tried to interject several times, but I held up my hand and kept talking. My father listened, his face going from confusion to shock to something that might have been shame. When I finished, he turned to my mother. "Patricia, is this true?" "Robert, you don't understand the whole situation. Did you move David into Sarah's house without asking her?" "I was trying to help him. He's our son. He needs to grow up." We both stared at my father. In 40 years, I'd never heard him contradict my mother on anything related to David. "He's 32 years old," my father continued, his voice heavy. "He's never held a job for more than 6 months. He's never paid rent. He's never faced a single consequence for any of his choices because you've always swooped in to save him. And now you've done this."
He looked at me.
"Sarah, I am so sorry. I had no idea this was happening." Comment below if you've ever had one parent enable while the other stayed silent. Hit that subscribe button. Smash the like. This story isn't over yet, and you won't believe what happens in the final confrontation. "Did you know he was living in your basement with Melissa?" I asked my father. "Yes, but I thought it was temporary while they looked for jobs and saved money. I didn't know about this." He gestured vaguely at my house. "I'm changing my locks," I said.
Today.
"At 4 p.m. the locksmith will be here. David is not moving into my house. Not now, and not ever. Any of his belongings that are still here need to be removed immediately, or I'm donating them." My mother made a sound of protest. "Sarah, please just listen. I'm not done. I'm also done being your backup plan. I'm done being the responsible one who fixes things when David's choices blow up. I'm done being punished for my success by being expected to share it with someone who won't work for his own. I am done. He's your brother," my mother wailed. "And I love him. But I'm not responsible for him. You and Dad chose to raise him without boundaries, without expectations, without consequences. Those were your choices. The consequences are yours too." My father put his hand on my mother's shoulder. "Patricia, we need to go. We need to get David's things out of Sarah's garage and out of her house. I can't believe you're taking her side." "I'm not taking sides. I'm acknowledging that we violated our daughter's trust and her home. We need to leave." They left. I watched from my window as they loaded furniture into my father's rental truck, my mother crying, my father grim and silent. The locksmith arrived at 4 p.m. exactly. By 5 p.m., I had new locks, new keys, and a new security code. That night, David called me. I let it go to voicemail. "Sarah, what the hell? Mom is losing it. She said you're kicking us out before we even moved in? I don't understand what the big deal is. It's just a room. You're not even using it. Why are you being like this?" I deleted the message. He called 6 more times. I blocked his number. My mother called from my father's phone. Sarah, please, let's talk about this like adults. You're overreacting. We can figure this out. I hung up. The next morning, I woke to 47 text messages from various relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all with variations of the same message. I heard what happened. I can't believe you'd turn your back on family like this. David really needs help right now. How can you be so cold? If you're still watching, drop a comment below. Hit that like button. Subscribe and share this video because this story is about to reveal something that changes everything. My mother had called everyone. She'd spun the story her way. Poor David needed help. Generous mom tried to arrange something. Cruel Sarah refused to help her struggling brother and threw a tantrum. I was the villain in her version, the selfish daughter with too much house and too little heart. I responded to one cousin, the one I'd always been closest to. I sent her a 30-second clip of the security footage, my mother measuring my walls, David and Melissa walking through my house, the mattress being carried in. I sent the text messages where I'd been traveling, with no knowledge of what was happening. I sent the timestamp showing they'd tried to hide everything in a panic when I came home early. This is what actually happened, I wrote. Do with it what you want. She called me within 5 minutes. Oh my God, Sarah. Oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
Aunt Patricia told us you just refused to let David stay with you for a few weeks while he looked for a job. She didn't say any of this. She's been doing this my whole life, I said. Rewriting reality to make David the victim and me the problem. What are you going to do? I'm not doing anything. I've said what I needed to say. If people want to believe her version, that's their choice. I'm done defending myself. But word spread. My cousin shared the footage with her siblings. They shared it with their parents. Within 24 hours, the family narrative had shifted. Phone calls started coming, apologies, expressions of shock. I had no idea. That's completely unacceptable. You have every right to be angry. My mother's phone stopped ringing. My father called on day 3. Sarah, your mother wants to apologize. I don't want her apology. I want her to understand what she did. She does understand. She's devastated. She's devastated that she got caught and that people know the truth. That's not the same as understanding. Silence on the other end, then. You're right. You're absolutely right. How's David? Angry. Defensive. Blaming everyone but himself. Your mother is still making excuses for him. And you? I told him he has 3 months to find a job and move out. I told your mother that if she undermines that deadline, I'm leaving. I almost dropped the phone. Dad, I should have done this years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I let this happen to you. We're almost at the end of this story, but we need you to do something first. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel. And comment below, what's the most important boundary you've ever set? Share your story with us. Weeks passed. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. I started therapy, finally processing years of family dysfunction. I learned words for things I'd felt but never understood. Parentification, golden child syndrome, triangulation, enmeshment. I learned that what I'd experienced wasn't just normal family tension but patterns of emotional manipulation that had shaped my entire life. David never apologized. He sent one text 6 weeks after everything imploded. I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed this family. I didn't respond. My mother sent cards. Long, rambling letters about how much she loved me, how she'd only been trying to help, how she hoped we could move past this. But never, not once, did she actually say I was wrong to do what I did. Breaking into your house, planning to move David in without asking you, hiding it from you, all of it. It was a violation of your trust and your boundaries. I'm sorry. I studied her face, looking for the catch, the justification that usually followed her apologies. But she just looked at me, eyes red, waiting. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. Can I ask why? Why did you think it was okay? She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee. Because I've always seen David as fragile. From the time he was little, he struggled with things that came easily to you. And somewhere along the way, I decided my job was to protect him from struggling. to make his life easier, to fix his problems.
She looked up at me.
And I saw you as strong, capable, someone who didn't need me the way he did. I thought that was a good thing. I thought I was raising you to be independent. You were raising me to need nothing so David could need everything, I said quietly. She flinched but nodded.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was doing. And when I saw you with this beautiful house, this successful career, this life you'd built, part of me was proud. But part of me was resentful. You had so much, and David had so little, and I thought it was unfair. I thought you should share. I thought you owed it to him. I don't owe David my life because you failed to prepare him for his own. The words were harsh, but I said them without anger, just stating a fact. She absorbed them like a blow. I know that now. My therapist has helped me see how I disabled David instead of helping him. How I damaged you by treating your strength as permission to ignore your needs. How I've been so focused on David's struggles that I've taken your successes for granted. She reached across the table but stopped short of touching my hand. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the childhood where you were allowed to be vulnerable, or the family where your achievements were celebrated instead of resented. But I can tell you that I see it now. I see what I did. And I am truly, deeply sorry. We're getting close to the end now, but first, let us know in the comments, are you rooting for reconciliation, or do you think some betrayals can't be forgiven? Hit like and subscribe for the conclusion of his story. I felt tears on my face and realized I was crying. Not from sadness, but from relief. From the validation I'd been waiting for my entire life. I needed to hear that, I whispered. I needed you to see me. Really see me. I do, she said. I see you now. And I'm so sorry it took losing you to make me look. We talked for 2 hours. It wasn't a fix-all. It wasn't a magic resolution.
But it was honest.
She told me about her own childhood, her own mother who'd played favorites, how she'd promised herself she'd never do the same thing, and then had done exactly that. She told me about her fears that David would never survive without her, about the guilt that kept her enabling him. She told me she was terrified of losing me forever. I don't know if we can go back to how things were, I told her honestly. I don't know if I want to. The relationship we had was built on me accommodating and you taking. I don't want that anymore. I don't want that either, she said. I want to know my daughter. The real you, not the version who never asks for anything. I want to earn your trust back. That's going to take time. And therapy. Probably lots of therapy. She smiled weakly. I'm committed to doing the work if you're willing to try. I'm willing to try, I said. But there are boundaries. Non-negotiable boundaries. Tell me. You don't have a key to my house anymore. If you want to visit, you ask first, and I decide. You don't make plans for my life, my space, or my resources without explicit permission. You don't guilt me about David. You don't compare what I have to what he needs. You take responsibility for your choices without making me responsible for fixing them. She nodded, taking notes on her phone. Anything else? If you violate any of these boundaries, I walk away. For good this time. I love you, Mom, but I love myself more now. And I'm not going back to being the daughter who sacrifices everything to keep the peace. I understand, she said. And I agree to all of it. We didn't hug when we left the coffee shop. But we smiled at each other, tentative and fragile, and it felt like a beginning. If you believe in second chances, hit that like button. If you believe some boundaries are permanent, tell us in the comments. Either way, subscribe because we're sharing the final update on what happened to this family. A year after the confrontation, my family looks completely different. David still has his job. He and Melissa moved into a modest apartment and are, by all accounts, actually functioning adults. He pays his own rent. He manages his own bills. My father told me David even started a small savings account. We're not close, David and I. We exchange birthday texts and show up to the same family gatherings, but the relationship is cordial at best. I don't know if we'll ever be more than that, and I've made peace with it. Sometimes growing up means growing apart. My parents are still married, still in counseling. My father has maintained his boundaries with David, and my mother has, to her credit, mostly stopped enabling. She slips sometimes, old habits dying hard, but my father catches it and gently redirects her. They came to visit me 2 months ago, staying in a hotel, asking permission before coming to my house. It was strange and awkward and hopeful. My mother brought me a plant, a peace lily, and said, "I know you said you didn't have any plants that needed watering, but maybe you'd like to start." I kept the plant. It's thriving. I've also set boundaries with other relationships in my life. I've ended friendships where I was always the one giving. I've walked away from professional situations where I was being taken advantage of. I've learned that no is a complete sentence and that people who really care about me respect my boundaries instead of testing them. My house still has 3 bedrooms. The guest room is now my home office, painted a cheerful yellow, full of plants and natural light. It's mine. Just mine. And that's exactly how it should be. This is almost the end, but we want to hear from you one more time. Drop a comment with the biggest takeaway from this story. Hit that like button if family boundaries matter to you. And subscribe, we have more powerful stories coming that you won't want to miss. I think about that night a lot, watching security footage from 9,000 miles away, seeing my mother measure my walls. I think about the rage I felt, the betrayal, the grief. But I also think about what came after. The boundaries I set. The family patterns I broke. The version of myself I discovered when I finally said no. People ask me if I regret how I handled things. If I think I was too harsh. If I should have given David a chance. The answer is no. Because what they don't understand is that this wasn't about one incident. It wasn't about one boundary violation. It was about a lifetime of being taught that my needs didn't matter as much as someone else's wants. It was about breaking a cycle that would have consumed the rest of my life if I'd let it continue. Setting that boundary, changing those locks, standing firm in the face of family pressure and guilt and accusations, it was the most loving thing I could have done for myself. And, in a strange way, it was the most loving thing I could have done for David too. Because he finally had to grow up. He finally had to face consequences. He finally had to become the adult he was always capable of being if someone had just stopped rescuing him. My mother said something in one of our therapy sessions together that stuck with me. I thought loving my children meant protecting them from pain. I didn't realize I was protecting David from growth and protecting you from being loved. It's not a perfect family now. It's not a healed family. But it's an honest family. And that's something we never were before. We're almost done, but before we wrap up, make sure you've hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turned on notifications. Your support means everything. Drop a comment below with your own story or reaction. This community is built on real conversations about real issues. There's a question that haunts discussions about family boundaries, and I hear it every time I tell the story. But they're family. Doesn't that mean anything? And my answer is yes. Family means something. But it doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean surrendering your autonomy. It doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation or violation. It doesn't mean you owe someone unlimited access to your life, your resources, or your peace just because you share DNA. Family is supposed to be the people who see you, value you, respect you. When they don't, when they treat you as a resource to be extracted rather than a person to be loved, you have every right to protect yourself. Even from family. Especially from family. The trap I set wasn't just the security cameras or the early return flight. The real trap was deciding to value myself enough to enforce consequences. The trap was refusing to play the role I'd been assigned my entire life. The trap was saying, loudly and clearly, I matter too. And that trap caught more than just my mother's scheme. It caught years of dysfunction. It caught patterns that were poisoning all of us. It caught the lie that love means sacrifice without limits. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to be taken advantage of anymore. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is disappoint people who've learned to depend on your compliance. Sometimes saying no to family is the only way to say yes to yourself. Final call to action, friends. If this story moved you, changed you, or made you think differently about your own relationships, show us. Hit that like button hard. Subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. What boundary are you going to set this week? What are you going to stop tolerating? Let's build each other up in the comments. That security camera footage is still on my phone. I've never deleted it. Sometimes I watch it, not to feed anger, but to remind myself of what I almost accepted. A life where my home wasn't my own. A life where my success made me a target. A life where I was so conditioned to accommodate that I nearly let someone move into my house without permission. I keep it as evidence that I found my voice, that I chose myself, that I set a trap and caught the truth. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 42 years old. I own a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Portland, Oregon. All 3 bedrooms are mine, and nobody gets a key unless I decide to give them one. That's not selfish. That's not cold. That's not cruel. That's called having boundaries. And boundaries aren't walls built to keep people out. They're gates that you control, open for people who've earned the right to enter, closed to people who've proven they'll do damage if you let them in. My mother is slowly earning her way back in. David may never. My father already has. And I've learned that family isn't defined by who shares your blood, but by who respects your boundaries.
This is my story.
This is what happened when my mother tried to move my brother into my house while I was on a trip. This is what happened when I set a trap. And this is what happened when I finally chose myself. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.
Not even for family.
Especially not for family who've been using you as kindling your whole life. Stand up. Set boundaries. Choose yourself. You're worth it. One last time before we go, tell us in the comments what's your biggest takeaway from Sarah's story? Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community. We'll see you in the next story. To violate your boundaries. I'm sorry for breaking into your house. I'm sorry for prioritizing David's comfort over your autonomy. The apologies were always conditional, always wrapped in justification. My father visited twice. We met for dinner, careful and awkward at first, but slowly rebuilding something. He was genuinely trying, to understand what he'd enabled all those years. I thought keeping the peace was the same as being a good husband and father, he told me over coffee one evening. I thought letting your mother handle everything with you kids meant I was supporting her. I didn't realize I was abandoning you both in different ways. 3 months after the initial confrontation, my father called with news. David got a job. Full-time, benefits, the works. He's moving into an apartment with Melissa next week. That's good, I said and meant it. How'd that happen? He ran out of options. Your mother tried to convince me to let them stay longer, but I held firm. And something clicked for him, I think, realizing that nobody was going to rescue him this time. How's Mom handling it? Not well. She's angry at me, angry at you, angry at the situation. But she's starting to see a therapist. I insisted on it. Marriage counseling, too. Good. There was so much more I wanted to say, but didn't know how. Thank you for finally stepping up. Why did it take this long? Is our family going to survive this? Instead, I just said, I'm proud of you, Dad. His voice cracked. I'm proud of you too, honey. You stood up for yourself. I'm sorry you had to. If this story resonated with you, show us by hitting that like button. Subscribe for more real stories about family, boundaries, and finding your voice. And comment, what's the biggest lesson you're taking from Sarah's story? 6 months after everything fell apart, my mother asked to meet me for coffee. I almost said no. My therapist encouraged me to at least hear her out, with clear boundaries in place. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between her hotel and my house. She'd flown to Portland specifically for this conversation. She looked older, more fragile. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. We ordered coffee.
Sat down.
The silence was painful. Finally, she spoke. I've been seeing a therapist. She's been helping me understand some things about myself. About how I parented you and David. I waited. I was wrong, she said finally, her voice small, almost breaking under the weight of years of denial and excuses. I thought I was helping. I thought I was protecting you both, but I see now I was hurting you.
I didn't protect you, Sarah.
I protected my idea of David. And in doing so, I ignored everything you needed. I stared at her, letting her words sink in. This was not a magic moment, not a perfect apology, but it was the start of something real. For the first time, I felt like she was speaking from a place of awareness instead of obligation. I hear that, Mom, I said, my voice quieter now. And I appreciate you saying it. But saying it isn't enough. I need to see that you understand boundaries. I need to see that you won't do this again. That my home, my life, my choices are mine, and you will respect them. If you can't, then there's no way we can rebuild trust. She nodded slowly, eyes downcast. I understand. I will.
I want to.
I need to. Her hands fidgeted with the coffee cup between us. I didn't realize. I didn't know I could hurt you like this and still call it love. I need help seeing the difference. You do, I agreed. And so do I. That's why I've started therapy, Mom. That's why I've been learning to recognize what's mine and what isn't. And that's why I think you should keep seeing your therapist too. Not just for David or for me, but for you. To understand why you act like you do. She exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and shame. I can do that. I want to do that. I want to be a mother who sees her children as separate people, not projects. I see now that I failed you. Not intentionally, but I failed all the same. We sat in silence for a few minutes, not awkward silence, but the weighty kind that settles when two people are finally listening instead of reacting. I noticed her eyes were softer than they'd been in years. She wasn't just seeing me. She was seeing herself, too. I have questions, I said, finally breaking the quiet. Why did you really think it was okay to move David into my house? Was it desperation? Or control? She flinched at the word control, but didn't deny it. Maybe both. Desperation to fix him. Control because I didn't trust him to do anything for himself and I didn't trust you to say no. I thought I was helping everyone, but all I did was create chaos and resentment. I see that now. I'm glad you see it, I said, my voice firm. And I hope you see that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. You need to prove your commitment to boundaries, not just talk about it. She nodded again, this time more firmly. I will. I don't expect forgiveness, not yet. I just want a chance to be different, to be better. We left the coffee shop, stepping into the crisp Portland afternoon. I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was perfect, not because my mother's apologies erased decades of enabling, favoritism, and unspoken rules, but because I had finally spoken, finally defended my space, my autonomy, my self-worth. And she had finally heard me. The months that followed were gradual, delicate, and often awkward. My mother and I didn't rush into hugs or family dinners. We texted each other about small things at first, books we were reading, recommendations for restaurants, funny things we'd seen. She learned to ask permission before visiting, and I slowly allowed her to see my home under my terms. The first time she brought a casserole without warning, I calmly returned it and reminded her, I appreciate the thought, Mom, but check with me first next time. She apologized, genuinely. My father remained a quiet but firm ally. He respected my boundaries and made sure David couldn't undermine them again. The change in him was almost more surprising than the change in my mother. For decades, he had avoided confrontation, choosing peace over justice. But witnessing the security footage and seeing the reality for the first time shook him awake. He became someone I could rely on, not to fix everything for me, but to support the choices I made for myself. David, predictably, resisted. The shock of suddenly being denied the home he thought was his sanctuary created tension. There were angry phone calls, passive-aggressive texts, and even a few attempts to manipulate me by making my mother cry. But my boundaries, once set, were firm. No calls at work. No entry without permission. No exceptions. He finally realized that his behavior had consequences and, slowly, he had to confront the life he had been avoiding. By 6 months, David had secured a stable job in logistics and had moved into a modest apartment with Melissa. He was learning, slowly, to manage bills, schedules, and responsibilities without anyone bailing him out. Our interactions became polite but distant. I could finally care for him without enabling him, which was a relief I hadn't expected. My mother continued therapy, confronting patterns in her own upbringing that had shaped her parenting style. She admitted how favoritism, guilt, and fear of loss had driven her decisions. We attended a few joint therapy sessions, not to fix everything immediately, but to navigate our relationship with transparency and honesty. Over time, we found a fragile balance. The lessons from this ordeal extended far beyond my own family. I realized that boundaries are not punitive. They are not about keeping people out. They are about protecting what is yours and allowing others to engage with you responsibly. Boundaries are the only way to have relationships without resentment, without fear, and without losing yourself in someone else's needs. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. It makes you honest. And when done consistently, it changes the dynamics in ways nothing else can. My mother learned that slowly. My father learned that. And I finally internalized it for myself. I also learned that standing up to family doesn't mean abandoning them. It means clarifying the terms of your relationship so that interactions are safe, respectful, and mutually beneficial. Family isn't defined by who shares your DNA, but by who honors your autonomy and integrity. My house, once threatened as a staging ground for someone else's life, became a sanctuary again. I converted the guest bedroom into my home office, with bright walls, large windows, and space for creativity. Every plant I added reminded me that growth requires care, but also boundaries. Every lock I changed symbolized the choices I now had the courage to enforce. My home belonged to me. No one could occupy it, rearrange it, or manipulate it without my permission. Even now, the healing continues. Trust doesn't magically reappear overnight. Family dynamics are complicated and deeply ingrained. Some relationships may never be fully repaired. David and I remain distant, and that's okay. My mother and I are cautious, careful, but growing. And I carry the knowledge that I can protect myself without guilt, without fear of being selfish, and without compromising my well-being for the comfort of others. I've extended this lesson to every area of my life. Professionally, I've refused clients or partners who attempt to take advantage of my hard work. Socially, I've learned to say no without shame. Emotionally, I've discovered that self-respect is not negotiable. If there's one message I want you to take from my story, it's this. You are allowed to have a life that is yours alone. You are allowed to say no, even to people you love. You are allowed to enforce boundaries that protect your home, your heart, and your sanity. Love does not require sacrifice at the cost of your dignity. Respect does not need to be earned. It must be granted before any other obligation. Family is complicated, but it doesn't excuse manipulation or violation. Your success, your home, your peace, your choices, they belong to you.
Defend them.
Cherish them. Guard them fiercely. And know that choosing yourself is not the same as abandoning those you care about. It's choosing life over enmeshment, growth over stagnation, and authenticity over compliance. The trap I set that September wasn't just for my mother and brother. It was for the toxic patterns that had defined my life. And it worked. It caught truth. It caught responsibility. It caught the chance for a different future. That's the real victory. If Sarah's story resonates with you, if it reminds you that boundaries aren't optional, or if it inspires you to reclaim your space, your time, or your energy, take action today. Hit that like button to show you value personal boundaries. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories that inspire courage and self-respect. A comment below. What boundary are you going to set this week? Who in your life needs to respect it? Share your story. You never know who you might help. Remember this. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You are allowed to stand firm, say no, and choose yourself. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I chose myself. I reclaimed my home, my life, and my boundaries. And so can you.